This week on Worldview, outrage erupts over the growing number of children starving and being killed in Israel's bombardment of Gaza, with criticism from both within the country and from supporters of Israel like the UK, France, and Canada. Is the conflict reaching a turning point? We have a special interview with one of Israel's most outspoken writers, Gideon Levy. Hello and welcome. I'm Suhasini Heather and this is Worldview at The Hindu. Now this week we're turning back to the situation in Gaza and the Israeli operations there that have been continuing since October 7th's terror attacks. Those have now crossed 600 days with 61,700 people estimated to be dead. The UN agency UNICEF says at least 50,000 children are dead or have been injured since 2023. Now, as the US tries to broker yet another ceasefire between Israel and Hamas for a 60-day pause, hostage releases and more aid convoys, scores of Palestinians have been killed in Israeli bombardment just in the past few weeks. Many, however, are dying from hunger.
Israel has now fully blocked aid entering Gaza for over 2 months. Blocking aid as a pressure lever is unacceptable. And last week, the Israeli Security Cabinet approved plans to expand its military operations in Gaza. We strongly oppose both these actions.
Dozens of children are dying of starvation. The images of mothers embracing their motionless bodies, caressing their hair, talking to them, apologizing to them, is unbearable. How could anyone tolerate this horror?
This month, scenes of Palestinians storming an aid center for food shocked many. At least 11 died in the stampede there, even as the UN said its food convoys are just not being allowed to enter. The alarming situation led 22 countries and the European Union to jointly demand that aid be allowed in by Israeli forces, even as Western countries other than the United States at the United Nations condemned the move to increase military operations, with an especially strong statement by the leaders of France, Canada, and UK threatening sanctions if Israel doesn't relent. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu then accused them of speaking for Hamas.
I say to President Macron, Prime Minister Carney, and Prime Minister Starmer, when mass murderers, rapists, baby killers, and kidnappers thank you, you're on the wrong side of justice. You're on the wrong side of humanity. And you're on the wrong side of history.
Thus far, remember, only the United States has consistently spoken up for Israel's actions in Gaza. However, some trouble there this week as US President Donald Trump said he had also spoken to Mr. Netanyahu and warned against strikes on Iran.
Back on Iran, did you warn Prime Minister Netanyahu against taking some sort of actions that could disrupt the talks there in a phone call last week?
Well, I'd like to be honest. Yes, I did. Next question, please.
Doesn't that on sanctions?
I did, yeah.
If Senate Republicans want to push
It's not a warning. I said I don't think it's appropriate.
So the question is Israel getting more diplomatically isolated, and can that change the situation in Gaza? Internally too, the past month has seen former Israeli prime ministers like Ehud Olmert, Ehud Barak, and former General Yair Golan call for the government to stop the strikes on Gaza. I spoke to Gideon Levy, who's one of Israel's most renowned journalists, a columnist with Haaretz, a newspaper that's taken a very critical view of Israel's bombardment of Gaza, and began by asking him whether the comments by Western leaders could be a turning point.
No declaration will change the policy of Israel. The only thing that can change the policy of Israel will be measures, actions. And the world until now is just talking, and Israel learned to live with condemnation and to ignore them as long as it is not being followed up by real measures. Like, for example, toward Russia a few weeks after the invasion to Crimea. As long as it's only talking, it is with very little influence. Add to this the notion that most of the Israelis believe that the whole world is in any case anti-Semitic, that the whole world in any case doesn't like us. So why would we care? They're all, I mean, it's their fault, not our fault. They are the anti-Semites. We are the moral people with the most moral people, a moral army in the world.
Right. Netanyahu, in
So-
fact, accused Macron, the French president, of speaking for
Absolutely.
Hamas.
Absolutely. Macron, who is really very devoted to find a solution, is labeled as a pro-Hamas. Anyone who dares to criticize Israel, anyone, is immediately labeled as anti-Semite. And, words will not change it. The only way to change it is taking actions. By this, I don't want to undermine those declarations. They are showing a new tone in Europe. They might be followed up with actions. They might. It might be a beginning of a new game. But we have to see if it will be followed up with actions or it will remain as a hollow lip service.
According to you, does India have a role?
First of all, every country in the world has a role because I believe that only by international pressure things will change. Israel will not change by itself. Forget about it. Israel will not wake up one morning and say the war must end because it's very brutal and barbaric. The occupation must end because it is an apartheid system and so forth and so forth. It will not happen by itself. It will happen only with the intervention of the international community. And the international community, India is one of the strongest actors, players, with very good ties with both sides, I must say. And someone who has such good ties can influence. The question is if India, like any other country, is ready to take measures, not only to talk. With talking, we are fed up. I mean, everything was said, everything was threatened, everything was condemned. It doesn't change anything. Is India ready to even sacrifice some short-run interests of India in order to get to a solution and to really try to influence Israel to put an end to this crazy, crazy war, first of all? That's a question that Indians should ask themselves.
Now you can see the rest of this interview online at www.thehindu.com. Very quickly, what is India's position here? First, India has expressed its solidarity with Israel over the October 7 terror attacks and repeatedly called for the release of hostages by Hamas. Now, remember, Israel has fully reciprocated India's support after the Pahalgam attack. Israel is, in fact, one of the few countries to openly back India's Operation Sindoor for strikes in Pakistan in retaliation. Secondly, on Palestine, India says its stand is unchanged, but the Modi government has been noticeably silent on issues it would have reacted to in the past, like the aid denial, where so many other countries have now spoken out. At the United Nations, India regularly votes against Israeli settlements and supports a two-state solution for a separate Palestinian state. And of course, India continues to provide development assistance to Palestine as well as regular donations to UNRWA, adding up to about $200 million in the past 25 years. $5 million for UNRWA just in 2024 in December was disbursed. At present, India is not mediating in the crisis, although in April 2024, National Security Advisor Ajit Doval did visit Prime Minister Netanyahu to call for a pause on attacks on Gaza during Eid. So that's briefly where India stands at the present. What's Worldview's take? India has too much history with Palestine and too many present-day ties with Israel to remain non-committal on the crisis in Gaza. The humanitarian implications of Israel's bombardment grow larger by the day, and India's silence is more noticeable, more visible as calls for a ceasefire come not just from West Asia, from the global south that New Delhi claims leadership of, but now from most Western powers as well. While other countries can negotiate with Hamas in the short term, the expectations of the world are much higher from India in efforts for a long-term two-state solution, given New Delhi's ties with both Israel's government and the Palestinian Authority. Worldview has some new reading recommendations as well. The first, really, this I just finished, The World After Gaza by Pankaj Mishra. Very thoughtful essays on the situation in Gaza and why the world has turned, at least for the moment, a blind eye to what is going on there. The second book, The Killing of Gaza, Notes on a Catastrophe, is a new book by Gideon Levy. But of course, he had earlier written The Punishment of Gaza. So both those books by my guest on the show today. Third, Original Sin, Israel, Palestine, and the Revenge of Old West Asia. This is by Stanley Johnny at The Hindu. Deluge, Gaza and Israel from Crisis to Cataclysm. This is one of a group of essays edited by Avi Shlaim, but really has a varied number of essays in it and quite up to date. And The Short History, or The Shortest History of Israel and Palestine by Michael Scott Bowman. That gives you a very quick look at how the entire crisis and in fact the conflict began. So we hope you enjoy reading all of these and join us again here on Worldview from the team. Thanks for watching.